Hi, hello, and good evening. Welcome. I'm Claudia Einecke, the Francis B. Bunzl Family Curator of European Art at the High Museum. And I want to welcome you and thank you for coming to tonight's program, which will take you on a tour of, well, a new installation of spooky prints that was put up in the European galleries recently. By the way, before I forget it, if you have questions and comments along the way, please feel free to type them into the chat. I have helpers that will keep track of that. And at the end of the tour or after the tour, I'll try to answer and respond to as many as we will have time for, hopefully all of them. But one more thing before we begin, I want to thank especially all the High Museum donors and members amongst you, because your support is really, truly invaluable, and it fuels our mission and allows us to do programs like this as well. For those of you who are not members yet, I urge you, beg you, please, and hope that you will go to high.org and after this program, not right now, after this program, and join the big family, the big membership group that we depend on and like to work with. All right, without further ado then, let's start. And with the first slide, I want to welcome you to my haunted gallery of witches, demons, and skeletons. Actually, let's go to the next slide, because here they are, these Halloween characters. The idea for this installation came to me the first time I laid eyes on this, the colored poster in the center here of the slide, because I mean, what a fabulous ghoulish figure. And I immediately thought, that would be so perfect for something to do with Halloween. And so then I rounded up a bunch of, or several anyway, other creepy and intriguing characters to present in this installation. So here they are. The earliest of these 8 prints is the one on the bottom left, which is from the, as far back as the 16th century, so the Renaissance. And the latest one in the group is the one on the bottom right, from 1917-18. So let's see what's coming up next on the next slide. I thought we might start with, well, no, I should say as a little caveat, because obviously none of these 8 prints were made with Halloween in mind. And in fact, if we look at them in their proper historical context, we'll see that they relate to some very serious social and political issues. But that shouldn't keep us from enjoying them sort of for their spookiness as well. So this is the first one. I thought we'd start with sort of something of like a haunted house, or something that could work for a haunted house, the kind of setting that would work for maybe even a horror movie. This is a print from the 18th century by an Italian artist. He did a whole series of these prints that depict imaginary, fantastic dungeons, as he called them. And although, as I said, they're completely imaginary, and they're really quite fantastic if you look at the scale of the masonry, these colossal blocks of stone, and you can't really tell, well, where does the space begin and where does it end? What is this, in this case, this strange structure above this doorway at the bottom? And these dungeons like this one seem to be inhabited almost by these strange machines. It looks like, these crossed beams that we see at the top. It seems to be, well, I don't know, it makes me think of some kind of torture chamber equipment. And but you know what really makes it so creepy and disorienting is the way the space is built. We can't really see where we are and where we would go if we go through that opening there, and what's going on with that space. And of course, this kind of dizzying and disorienting arrangement and structure is really that makes something, sort of makes you uncomfortable, and seems to be filled with all sorts of possibilities for nasty things to happen. But let's see what will happen if we go to the next slide and see if what we might encounter in this haunted house, as it were. Actually, well, interestingly, it is a witches' procession, also a whole procession of bizarre, strange creatures. And, you know, mystery and uncertainty are sort of the core principles or the core values that make something spooky or uncanny. And to be honest, everything about this print is mysterious. Beginning with the artist, we don't really know who invented this and made this fabulous engraving. I mean, technically, it's just a masterpiece. There are a couple of names that come to mind: Agostino Veneziano and Raimondi, Marcantonio Raimondi, who have been talked about because they were sort of the master printmakers at the time, and might have attempted something like that. Or it might be some artist we don't even know the name of. So that's a mystery. Then, of course, the bigger mystery, or the more exciting mystery, is that we have no idea what the title of this should be. It's often called the witches' process, or sometimes called the carcass. But you know, that's just more or less descriptive of what we see there, because nobody, and I mean scholars, Renaissance scholars, who are, of course, much more erudite than I am, have not been able to figure out what this really is about and what it's supposed to mean. And usually when you have a scene like this, it might be taken from literature, or it may be an allegory of a abstract concept or philosophical idea, but there's nothing that we know about that really would explain what we see here. Maybe it has to do with something astrological, because you know there are goats and rams in there, so you know Capricorn and who knows what. But and clearly, you know, goats in traditional iconography, goats and skeletons, like this amazing, strange, huge skeleton, and the sort of witch-like figure, you know, the old wrinkled hag who's riding on top of it. They clearly seem to, or maybe not clearly, but they seem to point us to into the direction of something that has to do with the occult. On the other hand, if you look on in the upper left-hand corner, what are those geese doing there? What could that have to do with any of the other weird stuff that's going on? A friend of mine said, well, maybe it's an allegory of the hunt for the duck dinner. In any case, you know, this is a really wonderful print, and really gives you all sorts of room for imagination and figuring out for yourself, or spinning your own ideas and stories around it, which I think is perfect for Halloween. So let's look at the next one, however, which is, you know, if in contrast to the witches' procession, we know exactly what's happening in this scene, because it's an illustration of a famous and well-known fable from, you know, first from antiquity and then popularized in the 17th century by Jean de La Fontaine, and it shows sort of one of our favorite our favorite, I'm sorry, so our favorite Halloween character, and that is the Grim Reaper, you know, the skeleton carrying a scythe and dressed in this long hooded robe. And, but, you know, the scene, the fable is about really the central figure is this old woodcutter, you know, tired, worn out, exhausted, who drops his bundle of wood and sort of laments his life, and that it's just a long years of really hard back-breaking work and unrelieved poverty. And in his desperation, he sort of calls upon death. And of course, you know, be careful what you wish for, because death in fact appears at his side and asks what he wants, at which point, of course, the woodcutter says, oh, well, if you could just help me pick up my bundle, I'll get out of here, I'm okay. And as the fable says, because the motto is, the motto of mankind still goes, we'll suffer all rather than die. You know, it's a sort of comment on the human condition, basically. But the viewers of this print at the time, in the 1870s when it was made, would have read in this print, in this illustration, also a very pointed comment on sort of a hot button issue of the day. And that is the destruction of the ancient forests of France. Because and what that meant for the poorest of the poor at the time. Because since time immemorial, basically, the Middle Ages anyway, the poor people were allowed to collect fallen wood in public forests and collect it and sell it as for firewood, and that would, you know, help them eke out their existence. By the 1870s, however, that changed, because the woods, the forests, the big forests were decimated, were cut down to make room for urban development and making room for modern roads. And in the process, because woodlands were more strictly regulated, this old right for the poor people was rescinded. And so of course that was not only a social calamity, but you know, that was one of the big issues, but also it you know, seemed to people or something, a deplorable loss of a very traditional way of life. And I think sort of thinking about it, traditions and traditional French way of life was very important, because I think this print was done in 1876. That's only 5 years after the French were defeated in the Franco-Prussian War by the Germans. So the national psyche was kind of fragile, and one wanted to hang on to the traditions. So let's see what the next one is. Death as the skeleton, as the bone man. And you know, in German we call, yeah, of course there's a skeleton, but we also call this death the bone man, Knochenmann. And obviously death as a skeleton is the most normal or the most common characterization that of death that we can recognize. And here we have him, interestingly, laboring under a very heavy burden, in this case a coffin that really is a lot more massive than the poor sort of gangly skeleton. And now the idea of depicting death in while performing everyday human tasks, or being involved and engaging with humans of all sorts of lives, of all walks of life, excuse me, is an old tradition in art, coming from the late Middle Ages, where artists depicted death calling on people from all social strata, old and young, men and women, children, kings, beggars, etc., asking them to dance, and basically as with the idea that this expresses that death awaits us all. In death, we're all equal. It doesn't matter what we have striven for. It doesn't matter what we have achieved. In the end, we're all the same. We're dancing with death. And that turned into the artistic tradition to make usually series of these prints that show the death in doing regular tasks. And so here death is playing the role of the undertaker. And at first glance, that might seem ironic, a bit funny. Well, on second thought, you realize that it isn't funny. Death is not enjoying his job right there. He's not grinning, but I think gritting his teeth. And that is because the print was first made in 1917 in a small edition in 1917. And at that moment, it was a very powerful and poignant commentary and comment on the unbelievable destruction of human life in World War I. Millions and millions of people dead. So no wonder death can hardly keep up with them, and is really laboring under their weight. And then furthermore, the print was re-edited or republished and more widely disseminated in 1918, so the following in 1918 in a very popular art magazine, Das Kunstblatt. And by that time, of course, death's burden had been horribly increased by the additional hundreds of thousands of people who had died and were dying in the influenza pandemic. So in a strange way, this print has sort of a double poignancy today, because of course, we're still dealing, there's war all over the globe. Well, not all over the globe, but there's still war in the world, and people are dying. And of course, more specifically, we are dealing with the horrible consequences of a pandemic ourselves. Let's go to the next, please. Which is perhaps a little more lighthearted, because what do we have here? Death, the Grim Reaper, the skeleton, but sort of ready to do its job in the city for a change, dressed in a suit and, posing nicely there in front of a window, and, with this hair flowing, curly, wavy hair, nicely barbered. Well, yes, but no, because this is interestingly a self-portrait of James Ensor, the artist whom most of you are familiar with, and as you will know, who had a real penchant for the grotesque and the absurd. And it's much of his art was politically and socially very critical, but he liked to inject a note of irreverence and absurdity. And certainly as a self-portrait, this is a very scurrilous idea, isn't it? I mean, at first glance, it looks like a normal portrait, somebody, posing very formally or nonchalantly leaning on the ledge there, and having a real presence as a figure, as a person almost. And that's not surprising, because actually the etching is a faithful copy, as we will see in the next slide, of a photograph of Ensor that was taken by a friend of his at his, or I guess outside of his house in Brussels. And you see, indeed, there is, everything is there, the pose, the dress of detail, even the white pocket square, and the hairdo, well, not the beard, but even, and that I think is really fascinating, the sort of very lively and human glance, because in the skull you have empty eye sockets, but Ensor here clearly did something to make us feel that there is a person in there, somebody who's alive. And of course, so it's a very strong and real core of realism and of the everyday in this print. But and then that is suddenly hijacked when you notice the incongruous skeletal face. So we don't know what Ensor had in mind with presenting himself this way. Maybe he meant the figure to be a memento mori, saying there's a person, but he's also in the midst of life. We're also in death. In that case, in that sense, or maybe he's just, and I wouldn't put it past him, just mocking himself a little bit, or maybe us, because we tend to expect that a work of art, especially when it deals sort of with questions of being alive, being dead, existence, should be serious and somber. But there is something a little bit ridiculous in the skeleton with a wavy hair and nice. Do you see he has ears as well? So it's really one of those funky, interesting images of all time. In the next slide, we see another, another Ensor, a still life of skulls and a mask. And, in traditional still life painting, when you have a skull, that's usually meant as a memento mori, as a reminder that death awaits us all. I mean, that's our final fate. But here the skulls are accompanied by a carnival mask, which of course also can be interpreted as a comment on the slippage between our real life, of how we see ourselves, the role we play in the world, and yet at the end, no matter what role we play, we end up as skulls. But I think the combination of the macabre on the one side, the skulls, and the grotesque, the mask on the other, I think creates a psychological tension that really leaves us not quite knowing whether we should be amused or really shocked by it. At the moment, with Halloween around the corner, I'm all for being amused rather than shocked. But let's see what the next one brings. That's, this is a shocking picture. Well, I don't know if shocking, but it's not always easy to, like with Ensor, where we don't quite know how to react to the image and how to take it. And I think this is even more so with this. Let's see, it's a lithograph. I mean, what is it we're seeing? It's some kind of weird, is it a creature? It's some kind of combination of recognizable things, body parts, like, that bug-eyed face. There's also apparently a naked woman up there slung across there. I'm not quite sure. And then there are some sort of maggoty kind of maggot-like wormy crawlies. Oh, I mean, for me, this one is really, really creepy, because I think it is sort of, it has a very, very much a nightmarish quality where, you know, you have elements that somehow may seem to, you know, based in reality, but they're put together in a way and following their own external logic that can't be explained with waking and not with waking logic. So this is one of 5 lithographs from, well, a portfolio of 5 lithographs. The individual prints are not titled, but the portfolio, the series is called I Looked and I Saw. I mean, which is already what's that supposed to mean? And it was published in 1896. And the artist, Jean de Caldin, dedicated it to Odilon Redon. And that may help us a little bit to understand this kind of imagery, because Odilon Redon, who you probably, was you know, also are familiar with, whose work you're familiar with, he's particularly celebrated for his print oeuvre, where he also explores sort of strange psychological moments or dreams, or, well, let's put it this way, Redon and Caldin with him, they were both symbolists. And the symbolists at the end of the 19th century was a whole movement in literature and art. And the symbolists were interested in the workings of the subconscious, of psychology and strain, especially sort of, dare I say, aberrant psychology. And they were interested in dreams and the way dreams work and how dream imagery makes sense in the dream, but not outside of a dream. They were interested in other unusual states of mind, especially drug-induced states of mind, of course. And I think that really is what we're faced with here. I mean, visions, hallucinations, dreams are obviously completely personal. They come out of one person's psyche. And so even though we might share the imagery, or we can look at the imagery, what it means or how it affects us is completely different from one person to the next, depending on our psychological makeup. Although I think in this case, I would imagine all of us agree that this is definitely creepy. The way this kind of apparition comes out of this black background. We don't know where we are, what's behind it, where it's coming from, and it's just there. And is it going to come at us, or is it going to retreat? Is it going to blow away and we wake up happy? Well, for the moment, it definitely is quite disturbing. Next slide, and that is our last work of art, work that we look at. And it's the one that I mentioned first because it started it all for me. Let's see. It's and basically we have, sorry, my favorite ghoul here. As I said, I saw this poster a couple of years ago when I was working on another rotation of posters. I don't know, in the European galleries on the second floor at the High, I have one wall at which on which I usually have sort of a group of posters switching around every 6 months with different themes. But anyway, so a while back I was looking for candidates for my next rotation there, and I saw this poster, and is just so outrageous. It's just so much fun that I, as I said, immediately thought I had to use it. And that was before I knew really what the poster was for or what it was about. And as it turns out, it was made in 1902 to advertise a periodical, a magazine. Well, actually, it's a newspaper. Sorry, it's more than a magazine. It's a newspaper called La Lanterne, and it's a very progressive liberal newspaper with strong anti-clerical politics. It says Journal Républicain. Back then, Républicain in France meant pretty radical and liberal. And so this poster advertises the magazine or the newspaper, and to make its political point, because it is anti-church, because church and state were the sort of the conservative forces in France at the time. So to make its point, the poster really uses a very satirical caricature of a Catholic priest. And, he's shown there with sort of bat wings and sort of devil's horns. And he's clutching and perched ominously on top of the Church of Sacré-Cœur in Paris on the hill of Montmartre. And actually you see the little windmill there identifies the neighborhood. And that's important because Montmartre in the 19th century, in the late 19th century, was sort of a notorious hotbed for liberal, radical politics and sentiments and activities. So then Sacré-Cœur, which was actually in 1902, was still not finished, but almost finished, was built smack in the middle of Montmartre, sort of as a sign, as a gesture of penance, to atone for the violence that had wrecked Paris in 1870-71 during the socialist uprising of the Commune. So then, in other words, the inscription, I'm not quite sure if you see that. My screen doesn't show it. Oh yeah, it is. At the bottom of the page, you see that inscription, voilà l'ennemi, says there you have the enemy. It tells you exactly that that from the radical point of view, political point of view, the forces, the combined forces of state and church were really threatening the liberal city of light. And you see here this wonderful figure trailing behind it, this sort of trail of, at first I thought it was a greasy swarm of flies, but actually when you look closer, it's blackbirds. But in effect, the message is the same. If we just look at the last slide, Eugène Auger, who designed this poster, was really one of the great poster designers of the Belle Époque, and this is his most famous piece, his most famous composition. And it's so cleverly done. I mean, the bat wings and the horns are really just distortions of the traditional garb of a Catholic priest, the cloak and the kind, I don't know the technical term for the hat they used to wear. And just with that little bit of adjustment, and then adding these glaring, glowing eyes and the very beaky, long nose and the sharp claws, and voila, there you have not just the enemy, but a very scary demon. Although at the same time, I think for our purposes today, it's so over the top, it's so theatrical and exaggerated. Well, caricatures are exaggerations by nature. It's also a little bit ridiculous. So I think it's sort of the best and the perfect character for Halloween, I think. Well, and that essentially ends our tour and of the Halloween gallery. So I hope it leaves you somewhat thoughtful and a bit creeped out, and well, mostly entertained, I hope anyway. So let me take now a look at your questions and comments. Where do I get those? Here. All right. Okay. All right. How long is the installation on view? Ah, good question. Maybe one of my elves can look that up because I'm not quite sure. But let's see, I think we installed it in September, October, November, December, January, February, March, probably till March sometime. So it hasn't been up for a long time, and we rotate these galleries every 6 months. Okay, so for this question, I'm going from the bottom. I'm sorry. So the people who asked first, well, that's not fair. Okay, well, no, I guess I do go from the bottom. So first of all, well, we will look at the procession, the witch's procession again, but can you, Erin, please try to find the death with a coffin? Because I can't, yeah, oh, stop, the one down, yeah. Let's see, sorry, I have to move this. The question was, whether the coffin was made, no, I don't find, coffin created in negative space. Let's see, that refers to how a woodcut is made, which this is. So everything that you see in black, so your woodcut is you take a block of wood, and everything that you want to print black needs to stay on top. So you have to take away everything that you want to be white. So actually the coffin itself, because it's black, it's the top of the block. It's the background that is taken away. I hope that answers Lee's question. Let's see, what else do we have? Okay, closing of the, we don't know, but it'll be a while. Okay. Yeah, all right, so this installation, it's just these 8 prints are, you know, in the middle of the European floor, the second floor in stand, there's this small, it's hard to call it gallery because it has a bunch of doors to utility closets and so on. But that's where I'm able to show works on paper. It's dedicated to works on paper. And it's a small space, so that's why there are only 8 works in there, sort of between 6 and 10, depending on the size I usually have. And so it's sort of in the middle of the suite of galleries on the second floor. Is that priest supposed to resemble a devil? The horns, the pitchfork on chest, how invested? Yeah, it was absolutely exactly that. It was exactly the point. You know, clericalism, as I said, the sort of the combination or the working hand in hand of the state and the church. It's in the next one, yeah. Indeed, we are supposed to recognize that figure as a caricature of a priest. It's definitely, it's not really a cross on his chest. It's part of their outfits. It's to the ends of a, well, not exactly a bow, but it's two pieces of fabric. Yes, all the works are owned by the High. They're in our collection of works on paper. We have a terrific collection of posters, which I mentioned I rotate in an adjacent gallery, and then all sorts of different prints and drawings as well. Let's see. Okay. There was one question, if there has ever been an exhibition related to Halloween, or and in which these things have been shown. I have only been at the High, well, it's now going on 2.5 years or something like that, not quite. And certainly in that time, there has not been anything Halloween themed. I don't remember ever seeing, or seeing in our sort of exhibition history anything like it either. I don't believe that. Certainly this selection has not been shown together. I take full credit for it. I hope you like it as much as I like it, because I think, art is serious and important, but it's also there to have fun with and to relate to our daily lives, whether serious or not so serious as well. Let's see. All right, can you find the procession again? The witches' procession early on, because obviously somebody asked for the dimensions. I don't have it in my notes. It's about, what's that? It's pretty big. It's about 2 feet wide, I would think. I'm terrible with measurements, but yeah, it's substantial. And, people really have written, I mean, scholars have really tried to figure out what this means, because, we might say, oh, it's just somebody's funky idea, or maybe a dream, and the artist, made this work out of it, which is not likely, because to make an engraving like this, just the pure labor of doing it, the technique, the technical, the labor, I really should say, is really, really high. I mean, it's an engraving is made by taking a sheet of copper and with a sharp instrument carving lines into it, which once you carve grooves into it, and you ink the plate and everything, and the ink goes into those grooves that you carve, and that's what's printed, sort of the opposite of a stamp. But working in metal with a sharp instrument, and then getting also these different tones, and the differences between really light areas and really dark areas, they are achieved by the depth of the line that you carve. So I mean, this is not something that's done in an afternoon. So clearly something has to be something more serious, a commission, something has to be behind it. Maybe it was made for someone, and it relates to that person's astrological horoscope, but clearly, somebody who's wealthy enough to be able to commission something like that. Let's see, what else do we have? Yeah, okay. Oh gosh, a bunch of new ones. Okay, so did Auger regularly design for La Lanterne? Yeah, I don't think he was the only designer who worked for it, but he worked for them more than this one time. And you know, I think with the history of publications, or the politics of publications, or of political publications at the end of the 19th century, most of the artists working for a publication would have, for a political publication like this, would surely have shared that political view and contributed wholeheartedly to the cause, to the political cause that was espoused by the publication. Okay, here, in the witch's procession, what is written on the baby's arm? Oh, there. Yeah, I can't. I think it's the baby that's being carried by one of the two guys leading that way. Yeah. I believe those are the initials AV, and that's why people think it might, the print may have been maybe by Agostino Veneziano. However, it's not quite clear, because an earlier state and prints like this, engravings, can have slightly different states. You know, the artist works on the plate and then he makes a print. Then he decides to add something more to the plate and then makes another print. And that second print is a different state from the first one. So in an earlier state, the initials aren't there. So one hypothesis is that Raimondi actually seems to be sort of the better candidate for having invented it, but he also worked with Veneziano, with Agostino, that maybe Raimondi initially invented the design, the composition, but then Veneziano actually executed it, so we don't know. But somebody, yeah, who was it? Sarah Day, thank you very much. So the print is 12 3/8 of an inch high, whatever that is, and 25 7 11/16 inches wide. Yeah, so about, you know, good 2 feet. I guess of course we all love the procession. Any idea what the small rectangle shape is on the ground? Ah, there. You know, it looks like my hot water bottle, but no, I'm kidding. No, I mean, my answer for is I don't know what it is. But yeah, I mean, can you see the skeleton? You know, the one on which the witch is riding. I can't even figure out what kind of. It seems that it is a skeleton that's even taken apart, because you see that the guys at the end seem to be lifting what looks like the leg bones of a horse. You know, it has a hoof on it, and that seems to be attached sort of to a kind of hip arrangement, and they're lifting it up because obviously apparently the skeleton cannot run on its own. But you see in the front, actually, the guy behind there is carrying like a foreleg of that horse, but it's detached from the main skeleton. But you see he has attached a piece of string from the hoof to the neck of this horse, or it must be a giraffe actually, because it's got a hugely long neck. But you know, to lift up that part of the skeleton, I mean, it's like, who could ever imagine that and think of it? And just all these details, and even the vegetation, you know, it's very creepy and spooky, isn't it? Because you know, it's completely dense. There is no space. It's sort of claustrophobic, and this, well, they look more like reeds than a forest, but yeah, which would go with the ducks as well. But that's just amazing. Let's see, self-portrait. Oh, can we see the self-portrait, some sort of hunt? Yeah, maybe, as I said, the hunt for the ducks for dinner. But the self-portrait with a, yeah, self-portrait, who's in the window, and in print is someone reflected in the window. All right, in the photograph, we think that it is a man called Ernest Rousseau, who was a very close friend of Ensor's, and he, I'm not quite sure if he was a professional photographer, but there are, if you ever Google Rousseau, Ernest Rousseau and James Ensor, they're really wonderful photographs. They apparently were really close friends, because you see them really, you know, wrestling in the dunes and you know, nothing, just sort of goofing around and having a good time. So we think that it reflects the photographer. You know how it happens when you try to shoot out of the window, you basically shoot yourself and you photograph yourself, the reflection. I've wondered about that too, if in the print there's supposed to be a reflection as well. I'm not sure. I'd really have to, it looks as if they're sort of in the upper left quadrant, as if there were something, but it could also be more abstract, you know, something to make the space, the reflected space, or even just to say that it is a reflection. But I think, you know, as much as this is a print, an etching with lots of lines and a lot of movement in the line, there is also this really high level of realism and of mimetic realism, you know, in you know, you do read it as a reflection, whether, you know, you don't see a face and you don't know what it is, but you know, this is a piece of glass that is reflecting something. And I think that's fascinating, because he copies all these details, like even the way you see how his jacket gapes a little bit there between the two buttons, because it's a very tailored jacket, and he repeats it there. So I mean, it's really messing with our minds, making it so real on the one hand, and then suddenly you're ambushed by the face, by the skeletal face. All right. Are skeletons in all of imaginary creatures? I'm not a zoologist, so I don't know if any of those skeletons look like real animals. That I can't help you with. Such a great presentation. Thank you. You're very welcome. Thank you. Right. Has anybody determined how long? Oh no, of course that wouldn't be in the program. Yeah, well, that's actually, come to think of it, because this is not like an exhibition, it is part of the permanent collection. And as I said, works on paper, because they are susceptible to damage from light and exposure, we generally show works on paper from our own collection for 6 months, and then we put them away for several years before they can come out again. So, however, because nobody is saying, you know, like in a special exhibition where you borrow a work of art and the lender says, I want it back on this and this date. The end date can vary, because, you know, it depends a lot on our schedule, when our preparators have time to deal with a new installation. So it'll be, what did I say? Probably in March, so, you know, somewhere around there. But oh, new messages. Okay, well then, I'm afraid, you know, as much as I enjoy your questions and your comments, I'm afraid it's about time that we, you know, take our candy and go home. But I want to thank you, all of you, very much again for joining us tonight. And you know, tonight was in the virtual realm, so these schools maybe weren't quite as scary as they might be otherwise. So that's why I'm issuing a dare to you. So I dare you to go to the museum, go to that gallery and confront death and demons and witches in person. And you know, seriously though, it's very important to remember that prints, you know, engravings, woodcuts, etchings, lithographs, you really can't appreciate them as prints, as these objects that were made and require a lot of technical skill. You can't appreciate that unless you actually look at the print. So I do hope you will do that again. And who knows, maybe one or the other will of these images will actually have a different effect on it, because you will see them experience them very, very differently. So one last thing, you know, as a member of the High Museum, you always have free admission. So I do hope that you take this into consideration, and really, again, I hope you will take the opportunity and go to high.org and make yourself a member and help us continue programs like this, and you know, also to buy more works like these that we then can have fun with. And also, you know, because the museum, because of COVID, there are a lot of restrictions on, we want to, and we do make the museum experience safe. You will have to, if you want to go, reserve a time ticket, and you can also do that at high.org. And so with that, I guess the only thing I have to do, I get to do, is thank you once again for sticking with us and being interested, and thank you for your very interesting questions and comments, and to wish you a safe and happy and fun-filled Halloween. It was great to be with you. Thanks.